Hello and welcome back to Crystal Confab. I'm joined by my crystal besties, Adam and Nicholas, and we are going to talk about what is affectionately known in the scientific community as a rock. I know it's not very exciting at all, but a rock just talks about a combination of minerals, and arguably, this is one of the best and most famous combinations of minerals known on the planet. It's trademarked and it is called Quantum Quattro. Are we ready to dive into some interesting and fascinating and complex magic, lads?
This is such an amazing stone. And last week I kind of alluded that it is one of my absolute favorites as well. But I'm really excited. I know, Nicholas, you wanted to share a little bit about what creates this stone or this rock and what's in it. And yeah, give us a bit of the history and makeup if you could.
Yeah, so to start with, materials like this have been known for a very long time, but this trade name was only coined in the late 1990s, and it really didn't get popularized until almost the very end of the 1990s. It was kind of touted as one of those stones of the new millennium, and was one of a series of things that were being, we'll say, brought to market under newly minted names. This is one of the few that stuck from that era, in part because the availability has not run dry, and it's also a lot more beautiful than some of those other things. But the term that was originally trademarked is quantum quattro silica, and it's kind of deceptive in another ways, in a number of ways. There's nothing inherently quantum about it, unless we're just talking about the behavior of all subatomic particles, in which case everything is quantum, if we want it to be, because they all don't necessarily behave according to the laws of Newtonian physics, and that's just life in the universe. But this quattro and silica bit is where it gets kind of confusing, because it is a rock as opposed to a mineral. It has variable composition, appearance, and texture, and that includes it has a varying number of minerals in it. They are not all silicate minerals. In fact, I remember being on crystal message boards in the very early 2000s. Yes, I've been a nerd for a really long time, and discussing with relatively reputable sources at the time what the primary constituents of this were. And you get ranges that include quartz and malachite and chrysocolla and Shattuckite and ahowite and dioptase. And now we're already up to six, and not all of those are silicates. But the truth is that if we examine a large enough sample set, we might find dozens of accessory minerals in here. And now we have compounded the problem by labeling other things from other places the same or similar sounding names, which has kind of diluted the meaning in this original material that one company owns the trademark to, the name at least. So what we've got, however, is an occurrence of a secondary copper deposit. So we have to look at quartz and what I've also seen affectionately called on mineralogical forums as copper vomit in two separate stages of development to understand how they come together. So we're going to start with our primary copper deposits. And when we talk about primary copper, we're talking about native copper, which is, formed by any number of activities, but it's that first, we'll say, agglomeration of usually relatively pure copper. And thanks to the percolation of groundwater and meteoric water, so in other words, the water that's already in the earth or stuff that's fallen down from the heavens and making its way into the earth, as it leaches its way through rocks, it is going to become nominally acidic, and that's going to enable it to break down the copper. It's going to initially give us copper carbonates and copper oxides and things along those lines. The carbonates in particular are going to give us the malachite, azurite, and similar related things that we're going to find in smaller amounts in quantum quattro and related stones. They are far less stable than silicate minerals, however. In fact, azurite is super unstable and will alter over time to give us malachite. We've also got, in some cases, evidence of like hydrothermal activity. So we've got superheated, super pressurized water that is merging with the primary copper deposit and the newly forming secondary copper deposit. And this hydrothermal activity is also what's going to give us the quartz in these veins. And where there are little fissures and cracks and empty spaces as the quartz forms and after it forms, all of this water carrying, we'll say, dissolved copper and other things is going to be able to deposit and fill itself in those gaps. So when we look at any given sample of quantum quattro, we are likely to find a fair bit of quartz. Whether we want to, you know, refer to it as smoky quartz or anything else really doesn't matter. It's not of requisite clarity. I remember in like the early 2000s, everyone really wanted to position it as being smoky quartz, and like it's just dirty quartz. It's not necessarily smoky, it's just not very pure, which is why it's not white or transparent. We're also going to get usually some Chrysocolla and Shattuckite, which are both copper silicate minerals. Chrysocolla in particular has a bit more variable composition and structure. In fact, there's a debate over whether it should be a valid mineral species at all. That's a conversation for another day, but I did hint last week we'd be discussing some Chrysocolla. And we might find other copper minerals in there. Our idealized lists that enumerate all the things in quantum quattro really want us to believe that we're going to find dioptase and ahoite in them. In all the samples that I have held over the past 20 plus years, I have yet to find any example of dioptase in at least the small tumbled bits or the jewelry that I've held. That's not to say that that's a definitive answer. I just haven't found a sample set of it. And it also seems unlikely that we're going to be able to visually distinguish ahoite from a number of those other things, particularly because most ahoite doesn't look like that beautiful material that we see as phantoms in quartz. Most ahoite looks like this. So this is ahoite from the type locality in Ajo, Arizona. That is where it gets its name. It's named after the town. I don't know why the town's name is garlic in Spanish, but it is. This has some, bright blue in there. That is Shattuckite. We see combinations of these copper minerals in secondary and tertiary oxidation zones quite often. This is how turquoise forms. This is how most Chrysocolla forms. It's how we get a lot of these fun things. So here I've got a mixture of Chrysocolla and Shattuckite. We've got some metallic heterogenite, which is a cobalt oxide. There's going to be some other stuff that is broken down in there. I've got some calcite in matrix with some bright blue planchite, which could also theoretically be in some of our quantum quattro, and this one has some nice dioptase. This is a different environment than what produces the quantum quattro, however, which is why we get this nice crystalline dioptase in there. And this one is fun. This one is from the Congo, which also has some really great secondary copper deposits in there. And we've got some bright blue Shattuckite, definitely some green from Chrysocolla and Malachite, but also on this side, I don't have great lighting, but that is a gemmy little pocket of dioptase. So hypothetically, these things all tend to form together in a lot of environments, although that original quantum quattro only identified at minimum 5 minerals in there, and it was from Namibia. We have seen very similar materials in other parts of the world. Some years back, there was a mine in Peru that was also touted as being a source for authentic quantum quattro. I don't know how the trademark holders would feel about that, but I've also subsequently seen things like phoenix stone and quantum otto, in other words, the Italian for 8, because there are at least 8 things in it. But I mean, I've got news for you, friends. There were probably at least 8 things in the original quantum quattro silica as well, because I think people just stopped counting at 4 and then continued to list other accessory minerals. And the challenge that we've got with naming conventions like this is they are not recognized by any scientific organization or specialization. So this is not a geological term. This is not a gemological term. This is not a crystallographic term. This is not a term we see in petrochemistry or geochemistry or X-ray crystallography. This is entirely a term that is used to sell a material that doesn't roll off the tongue, to say that it is a mixture of secondary oxidation, copper minerals, and quartz doesn't sell jewelry. To most people, I would go, oh, tell me more. But I do understand that that's not going to work well for everyone. And as we've touched upon in the past, I love copper minerals. I had a couple real special finds my last like week and a half working at my museum job before the semester ended, of things like planchite and leuroconite from historic locations. This leuroconite, which is a very unusual copper mineral, might be among the first ever discovered and named. It comes from a very historic collection, and I will be investigating that further. We've got some great planchite from the French Congo, which doesn't exist anymore. It has undergone a handful of names since it was officially the French Congo. That also gives me a marker in time as to when that piece should have been mined. But these kinds of copper mixtures for me are so evocative and visionary, and we'll say imaginal, not just in as much that I mean related to the imagination, but related to our ability to perceive, to generate, to create images. I am over fond of the materials that come out of the Congo because I find them to be some of the most brilliant and brightly colored that you can get. I also have friends who are from the Congo, and like their family, their home, their community that they came from does the mining. So when I buy from him, I know where the money is going. It's supporting the people doing the labor, and that's always great. But I do have to say that one of my recent acquisitions from a very similar kind of environment is vying for attention in my personal collection, and this comes from the Tentadora mine in Argentina, and this is euhedral quartz, in other words, quartz with fully formed faces, with it appears to be mostly chrysocolla with some malachite, but there may also be some cornatite and other copper oxides. So this is a complete quartz crystal encrusted with these same kind of secondary copper deposits on it. And there's like just a couple little places where the quartz peeks through, but you can see that hexagonal cross section in there, and it does evoke this similar kind of quality of fueling our ability to see, to imagine the life we want, to enhance our dream state, to enable us to be clearer in our inner vision work, as well as how we manifest that in the world around us. And copper is always this kind of synergistic, connective element that helps, I think, in some ways connect the wires between our interior landscape and the world around us. And whether we're working with the quantum quattro or any of these other kind of copper melange minerals and other rocks that are just mixtures of wonderful ore minerals, they have this power of helping us like paint the life we want. They're such brightly pigmented minerals, and many of them have been used as paint pigments. And I mean, not just days gone by, very expensive paints are still made from them today occasionally. But it really just helps us paint the life we want in broad strokes and then fill in the details with the actions we take. And for that reason, I will always be enamored of them.
I would just
I
like
love.
to claim Copper Melange as a drag name, just quietly. It is exceptional.
You get it. I just want a royalty every time she gets a tip.
Sorry, Adam.
I love it, and I'd love to make a point here. I guess one of the challenging things is when we buy our crystals, knowing exactly where they come from. Your average shop or your average on-site online seller isn't going to necessarily, they may say it's from a place, but is there any guarantee of that as well? So, in the practice of showing off our crystals, I love Quantum Quattro. It is one of my favorite three crystals, I'd say. This is one of my big pieces that I raped and pillaged to get as well. And this is a really treasured piece I have. This is a raw piece that I do believe is a bit of dioptase on the top, which were both sold and said to be from Namibia and the Quantum Quattro as well. But I think Nicholas made a really great point that, there are these copper vomits that are found not only in Namibia but elsewhere in the world. Does that matter? Not really, because when we talk about, we've talked about it in our amethyst episode and other episodes as well. Every crystal, not all amethyst is the same, just like not all smoky quartz is the same, just like not all topazes are the same. It's our own relationship with it. So as we have this discussion today, if you're starting to sit there and go, oh, I don't know whether mine is a real quantum quattro or whether it's from Peru or somewhere else in the world, it's about forming your relationship with it. See if what we discuss in this confab actually resonates with you, and hopefully that builds your relationship and it does bring up some really powerful things as well. Now, I know, Kyle, for you, this is a really powerful crystal. How do you like to work with it, and what's it done for you?
For me, Quantum Quattro, as I showed, this is probably one of my first pieces. It had an immediate sort of connection to shifting the way I looked at my world, at myself. Like, self-awareness for me is the word that comes through, and self-awareness is something that's thrown around a lot. But for me, Quantum Quattro accesses what Nicholas touched on, the microcosm and the macrocosm of life, right? All the minutiae, all the little things, all the complex things, and then all the simple things, all the big things, all the influences, right? The day-to-day influences, the influences from the past, the influences from the people that surround us, governmental and institutional information that influences us, right? There are so many things that layer upon us in life that Quantum Quattro and its associates and friends will access that connection because it is complex in its nature. It has so many layers going on. We can access so many layers in our life. We can have objectivity, we can have emotional connection, we can have emotional resilience, we can have intellectual analysis, we can have the ability to kind of push ourselves forward into battle. I think Quantum Quattro can nourish us in whatever way we need, whatever we're kind of tackling, whenever we're tackling it, especially if you are kind of, I don't want to say battling the voices in your head and the voices outside of you, but if you need to listen to like your higher truth, your full truth, and not what's going on around you, not because of the noise, but understanding that the noise is coming from somewhere, that the noise is because other people have their lives and their own stresses and their own situations, and it gives you the ability to see why, to some respect, why certain things are happening around us. It gives us that ability to stop and see and go, okay, like I know that this person and that person are influenced by XYZ because they have these stresses on their life. That's making them more like this. I know that I'm reacting in this way because, they're triggering me with their frustration, but I know it's just a trigger. And so I'm going to pull back because I know that they're frustrated and I'm not going to engage in that. I'm going to give the space that is required to this situation so that it can, shift and change. Sometimes we are so in our head and so focused and so like, I'm going to fix it and I can do everything and blah, 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 blah. Actually, maybe we need to stop, take a breath, pull ourselves out of ourselves, right? Out of your physical form and see that big picture. Like it's very eagle-like, where it can soar above, see all the avenues going in different directions. If you make this choice here, it will take you there, which will then give you another option to go there, right? It actually helps to sort of expand your world. If you've done any video game playing, right, you can start off with this little bubble or this little square of land that's all you see and that's all you know. And the more you explore, the more you find, the more you discover, the more you see is happening out there. But like, you're not discovering something new that hasn't existed before. You're just discovering it new for yourself, right? We go into places like I'm an explorer and I'm discovering something that's like colonistic. I know what's happening and I'm putting my flag here. It's like, well, no, things have existed before you got there, right? There have been influences that have been happening that have gotten you to this point here, like us having this discussion. We've all had different things that have brought us together here, and it's not simple, it's complex. We've all had our lives that have brought us to different points, and I think when we work with quantum quattro, we can see that past, we can see the present, and we can see future options. Not necessarily the exact future. I think, like, let's not put that out there, but like options. This is what I can do. This is what might happen if I put my energy in this way. If I continue to make this choice, this is going to continue to happen. But if I choose to do something different, take a different action, we can change course. It gives us the ability to be empowered through our own shifts and changes. It helps us to see that this is what works for me, and so this is what I am going to do. That's what was told that I should have done, and I've realized that that's not for me, right? We understand that the things that are told to us, the things that are taught to us, the things that are bombarding us constantly are not necessarily our truth, are not necessarily our whole truth, and we can find our way through. As just before we started and I was sitting down with my caftan, Adam's like, oh, this is lovely. I'm like, yes, I love it. I like to wear things that make me happy. Now, this is something that Quantum Quattro has brought forward for me, and it may seem superficial, but it's actually really important. I find my aesthetic very empowering. The way I dress, the way I look, the way I present to the world empowers me to be more myself, more authentically myself. It allows me to show up better. It allows me to feel more happy and confident. A lot of people nowadays, it's called dopamine dressing. But for me, it has always been self-expression, right? We are allowed to express ourselves in whatever way we want. And I love to be able to express myself through how I present. And that in itself has become a power because it draws attention. And it draws attention in very different ways, depending on the situation, depending on what's going on. You see that people are going to look at you. People are going to judge you. People are going to question you, right? Why are we so influenced by that judgment, those questions, those opinions, all of that other stuff? Why can't we just be more authentically ourselves and make other people uncomfortable? Make people look, right? People are going to look, people are going to stare, and people are going to judge no matter how you dress, no matter how you present to the world. And the ability to dress comfortably is the ability for me to be myself, and to be our authentic self, I think, is what Quantum Quattro is really all about. Like that pure, authentic, how can you show up for the world? How can you be the best version of yourself for the world? How can you create healing and bigger things and more complex changes in the world around you by doing more, by showing up authentically and then allowing yourself to fit in, as Nicholas mentioned, fitting into the cracks that have formed, right? We are able to find space by being ourselves. We are able to like squeeze into the cracks and be bright and be magical and be in your face and still fit in with other things, right? I am definitely, I would say, of the three of us, the most extroverted, and that is perfect. Like, I think that works. Like, we all have a balance. We all are very different. And I think if we were all me, we'd all be sick of me. I would be sick of me because I get sick of me. So I'm sure, like, if there were three of me, it would be too much. I get it. I understand. But imagine living in this brain, right? We are all meant to be ourselves. We are all meant to find our own way. We are all complex, strange, multifaceted beings, and working with Quantum Quattro and their friends alike allows us to really tap into that complexity, tap into our weirdness, tap into all of the facets and avenues that have brought us to this point, and how we can use those colors to create new paintings and new pictures and new ways of doing. Like one of my favorites that I've actually worked with, which is an Australian version of this. So this comes from South Australia. This has azurite with chrysocolla, malachite, little crystals of feldspar and quartz, and who knows what else. And it comes from a copper mine, funnily enough. Like, and it has given me a new sort of new vision on it because it's so azurite heavy. It's actually got lots and lots of azurite in it. So it's very insightful in the way that I found it working. Whereas other pieces that I have that are so like chrysocolla and malachite heavy, they're such more heart-centered in the way that they work. And I found myself more driven by that. So I think the makeup also will influence whether it is a little bit more heartfelt, a little bit more head connected, a little bit more layered. And I think whatever it is awesome. Whatever it is perfect. And I think embracing that weirdness, embracing that ability to, like, they want to trademark me, but guess what? I'm going to appear in different parts of the world in different complexities, and you can't stop me. Thank you very much. Copper melange.
Love it, love it, love it. One of the comments, I just want a bit of a throwaway comment to remind everyone that copper is sacred to Venus. And when we think of her being the goddess of love and beauty, and what Kyle's just said there is very Venetian in his speaking as well. So this would definitely be a great crystal for connecting with your Venus kind of aspects in your astrology and so on. The other thing I'd love to ask you is, probably when it comes to emotional healing, this is a powerhouse stone for that. But when we think about emotional healing, that can feel a bit epic and dramatic and kind of big life upheavals. But when working with this crystal, Kyle, have you found it to be a big epic kind of crystal in that way, that it does kind of flip the table?
Honestly, I find it to be the opposite. I find it like this piece in particular is in my pocket on many days, and it allows me to just live mundanely. Like, it allows me to just go to work, do the job that I need to do, and not overextend myself, not try too hard, and actually be within the limits of what I need to be on that day. I generally find myself drawn to my quantum quattro when I just need to not do any more than I'm doing. Like, I don't want to add any more to my plate. I don't want to, like, take on any more than I've already got. And it's always the one that I'm like, this is enough. And today I'm just going to do enough, and I'm not going to push or force. And I know that that is going to be enough.
What about yourself, Nicholas?
You know, I lost my train of thought.
Do you find this one to be an epic, big, like flip the table kind of emotional upbringer, or how do you find it works on the emotions for you?
I find that it's kind of a top-down effect. It works for me first, unlike most copper minerals, it works for me first from the mental space. And once I get my head around the big picture, again, using that kind of visual element, then I can kind of suss out how I feel about the different parts and pieces of the big picture. But I really have to come from that space of like surveying the landscape and seeing what all the contrasting elements might be. Because otherwise, I feel like what it's cautioning me against is just acting on a first glance. It's so thoughtful of a stone. It really invites us to pause and not just take that surface level feeling, but to integrate mind and emotions for a more holistic picture.
Can I just
Mm.
take that word, integration? Oh my God, like the integration of lessons and of emotional healing and of like this, the meditations that we like to integrate the lesson can take years, right? Months, weeks, like it can take so much longer than we think. It's like, oh, I've had this inspirational thought. Now integrate the lesson, right? Now actually live it every single day and let it integrate into your life. Sorry, I had to just jump on that. I love that word.
Yeah, no, I think this crystal definitely does that. It was interesting what you said, Kyle, about I also agree with you that I find it really quite comforting, although it is powerful and it's healing. This piece that I've got around my neck, Quantum Quattro was kind of a crystal that came into my life as I transitioned from being a crystal enthusiast to a crystal educator, and was kind of on that journey of being placed in situations in my life where people were asking me to teach and write books and create meditations and so on. But I'd often find I just catch myself holding it. It almost like it's there, and it works in the background really, really beautifully. So I love it in that way. And I think it's going to be a really great one as we kind of head into the coming weeks. We have another major retrograde. I know I talked about a couple last week, but we have a major retrograde in Chiron going into retrograde. Now, to really appreciate this retrograde, I think it's important to kind of understand the story behind who Chiron was in Greek mythology. And I'll give a very simplified kind of version of it. But basically, Zeus, we know that as a god, had a lot of love to give. And one day he found this beautiful young nymph who he kind of was, became infatuated with and wanted to, bed her. I think her name off the top of my head is Philandra. Anyway, she wasn't interested. She'd run away whenever he came near. But of course, that kind of just encouraged him more. Eventually, what he did is he turned himself into a stallion, ran her down, had his way with her, and then vanished off on his next conquest. Now, from that interaction, she actually fell pregnant. And when she gave birth to Chiron, he was born as a centaur because his father at the time was a stallion. He had the 4 legs of a horse and then the upper torso and head and arms of a man. Now, because he was kind of considered a bit ugly and he was basically a product of rape, his mother didn't want him either and his father had buggered off long ago, so he was abandoned. So poor old Chiron had a very rough start to life. No one wanted him. He was very much unloved. But what was really interesting, he was then kind of taken under the wing of the god Apollo, where he was trained in medicine and warfare and philosophy, healing, all these different types of things. And he became one of the greatest teachers and most sought out teachers in the world, teaching warriors such as Hercules and Jason, Achilles, I think, as well, and that type of thing. So when we look at the life journey of Chiron, what actually happened is from that childhood wound of no one wanted him, he actually became one of the most wanted people and sought out people in this world. So Chiron is this astrological body in the sky that kind of acts a bit like an asteroid, a bit like a comet, and is thus called a centaur. And it's something that was discovered more recently in astrology, but when astrologers kind of started to examine it, it became a really key part to understanding our key astrology. So each of us, like we have a sun sign, a moon sign, a Mercury sign, and all the different planetary signs, we have a Chiron sign. And the Chiron sign shows us where we have had a childhood wound in an aspect of our lives. And when Chiron goes into retrograde, this will come up and kind of trip us up. Like Chiron eventually was killed by a poison arrow. He was the wounded. He was known as the wounded healer. We all have this wound that trips us up in life. And, people often ask me, well, does something bad happen because I have my Chiron there? It may be that, just because of your astrological makeup, you tend to have more of a sensitivity. It could have happened to a whole group of kids in your grade 1 class, but because you had a sensitivity, it impacted you more. When Chiron goes into retrograde, salt gets thrown on this wound. This is a wound that will never truly heal, type of thing. So to talk from my own personal experience, my Chiron is in Taurus, which means that I will always have this wound around money and worth and having enough kind of thing, having that stability. But so what can happen during a Chiron retrograde is you're going to find, money problems will come up if you've got it in Taurus or so on and that kind of thing. But as we know, every retrograde brings a lesson. If you have not experienced a pain in the past, you cannot totally become a healer for other people in the future. And often what happens is that which was painful for you in the past, you become an expert in. So I, as being now self-employed for over a decade now, have the ability to make money whenever I need to. If I need to bring money in, although I often have panic attacks that I'm running out and don't have enough money, I know that I can turn on certain switches and generate money if I need to. I've become a master of money in that way. But also, whatever your Chiron sign is, and everyone will be Googling now trying to work out what theirs is and learn all about it. There's whole books about it. That this is a really great one. You have to go through that pain to be able to become a master of it. As a gay male, I know what it's like to be gay and the challenges that there are that come up with that in life. I will never truly understand, as many women can tell me the challenges of being a woman. because I haven't personally lived that, I will never totally be able to relate to that as much as I can a gay man, and so on. So there are some really great lessons that come up, and this is where you want to grab your quantum quattro. Now, I'm going to get really traditional, and we've had a really powerful discussion today about what's in these stones. But I find that each of these crystals together work and kind of guide you through this Chiron retrograde healing. So first of all, there's the malachite that we often find in there. Now, what I love about malachite is I find malachite's like the bad cop. It really helps you. It's like a big hand, and it draws up issues. And like Kyle was talking about, it helps us to face them and realize that it's time to look at this and be responsible for it. So whatever happened to us, and learning your Chiron wound can be really powerful. Going, this is something that hurt me as a child somehow. I was sensitive to this. We then bring in the Shattuckite, which obviously is that deeper blue, works really well with intuition, and it helps us to understand the situation from an adult. Childhood wounds, sometimes we deal with childhood wounds still looking at it as a child, but we can bring Shattuckite in, and Shattuckite helps to open our mind and look at the full picture, the full perspective. What was the doubt? How did this hurt me? And acknowledge that pain, but also how did it serve me? And how has this made me the person I am? We then can bring in some of that dioptase, and dioptase is amazing for opening up the heart and accepting. It is what it is, it was what it was, and it made me who I am today, and takes you through that part. Chrysocolla I find to be really good at helping to release pain, so we then bring in that Chrysocolla aspect to let go of the wound and the negative effects and how it trips it up in our lives. And then we've got the quartz, whether it be, a clear quartz that is quite harmonizing, dirty quartz, or a smoky quartz that's quite comforting. So you go through this journey of realization, understanding, acceptance, relief, and reharmonizing. So it's a really amazing one to lean into. Do we have to take ourselves through that journey bit by bit consciously? You could. As Kyle and I have mentioned, we find just having it around, it's kind of like it does the work in the background, kind of helping to support you and just move throughout these things as well. The one epic thing I have found where quantum quattro can be a little bit kind of rock you to the rafters is with my 8-week program, my Crystal Connections course that I run from time to time. I give people crystal homework, and we all try, and we come back each week with some notes. Now, one time, because I love to use my students as guinea pigs, I said, okay, we're all going to get a bit of quantum quattro, and we're going to pop it in our pillow slip, and we're going to see how we go for the week, and we'll compare notes next week. Nor myself or anyone in that class was able to complete that challenge, because we did find that quantum quattro brought up really epic, disturbing, not necessarily scary, but just like you didn't get a good night's sleep with it in your pillow. It brought up these kind of dreams. So I think maybe this is something that works not so much just on the conscious level, but really on the unconscious or subconscious level, and is really powerful in that way. So I've said a lot, but I do love this crystal, and it's one I've dived into a lot as well. So yeah, it's an amazing one in that way. The other thing I wanted to ask you two as well is, obviously, when we've talked a lot about quantum quattro and talked about its emotional healing aspects, is it good for anything else beyond its emotional healing, or would you just work with it for that?
I would say absolutely not just emotional healing, like just giving yourself perspective on day to day, giving yourself the ability to see, as Nicholas touched on, that stop from the top down, see the big picture, see all the avenues, right? Stop being the victim and allow yourself to be more empowered by seeing more. As I mentioned, I am very Sagittarian. The Chiron lesson, I think, is like a core Sagittarian lesson that we have to all go through. Like, I know, and I was taught this by my mum, who's also an astrologer, knows Adam well, that like one of the lessons of the Sagittarian is that like we want to be loved, and when we're not loved by everyone, it's like, why doesn't everyone love me? Why don't you love me? I'm amazing. And it's like, not everyone's going to love you. It's okay. You're an acquired taste, and that's fine. We're not going to be everyone's friend all the time. And that was a little lesson, just as a Sagittarian, that I had to go through. It's like, why don't they like me? I'm just myself. And it's like, often they don't like you just for being yourself.
What about yourself, Nicholas? Would you use it for anything beyond emotional healing?
Yeah, sometimes this is a stone I'll recommend for energetic protection. It gives us that kind of, I'll say, bolstering effect from the quartz that I won't say amps up our energy field, but certainly helps the natural defenses kick in. And all of those copper minerals that are present, one, give us the gift of perspective. So, if you see a train coming, you get off the tracks. That's actually the best protection there is. It's not building a shield, it's just being smart about where you put your time and energy and focus. But also, the other bits of magic that come from the copper is that we can have a kind of protection that isn't a wall, that doesn't seal you off, because copper gives us the magic of forging connection, of forging relationship. The thing that derailed my train of thought earlier is that Kyle said something that reminded me of a Latin phrase that I wanted to try to find the origin of so I could chime in. And it's this expression, "Meretrex metallorum," meaning somewhat poetically, the harlot of metals, because copper is so readily attacked by acids and other reagents that it forms oxides and sulfides and carbonates and hydrated and non-hydrated forms of all of these things. And so in the kind of alchemical lore of old, they viewed copper as giving it up real easy to all of these other cationic bases. So it forms a whole range of compounds. But at the same time, copper is always seeking the most stable form in whatever environment, even if it means going through a transitional phase to get there. So having our copper melange with that quartz is going to give us the kind of bolstering quality that quartz does, that fortifies the field, but still the flexibility to forge relationships through. So we get the gift of the selectively permeable membrane. We can be easy when we want to be, and we can also say no thanks. I'm done here.
Do you think just I'm thinking on my feet here because of that copper connection and then to Venus and thus beauty and relationships. This would be when we think of love stones, we're often thinking of a lot of our pink crystals. Would this be a really good one for maybe I guess once you're in a relationship, being like it kind of I feel it might bring a bit of maturity to a relationship because all the things we talked about of like acknowledging that we can sometimes contribute to problems, bring healing through relationships. There is no greater healing that's possible than a romantic relationship because that's where our deepest wounds and cores and insecurities come up. But this could be a really nice one just around the house to support you to have a truly healing relationship with your partner.
Yeah, and to add to that, like helping you picture the life you want, the life you dream of with your partner. To get there, you got to work through the baggage because we're rarely ready to go. We don't come fully formed as an adult entering a serious relationship without any problems. It is actually in those situations the problems get magnified, as you said. And I think what a mixture of copper minerals that includes things that we find in our quantum quattro and related stones is the gift of vision, the gift of communicating that vision, the ability to not get hung up on the wrong details, not being able to see the forest through the trees, but having that top-down perspective so we can really integrate the parts and pieces and decide how to navigate that space.
I have also definitely done that within my own relationship. It is something that I have now being 20 years with my husband. Like you go through the waves, and there have been times where I put quantum quattro in the bedroom because we need a bit of harmony, we need a bit of shifting. It will go into different parts of the house depending on what's going on, and it helps you to go with those ebbs and those flows that are natural within all deep relationships.
And I guess when we look at the colors of the crystal and what chakras it probably resonates with, we've got the greens that work beautifully with the heart. It's got the deep blues that work really well with the third eye chakra and thus the mind. So it integrates the head and the heart. But then we've got the beautiful blues in there that allows us to speak. So often people can speak purely from emotion or purely from the head and not bring those two together. I think this would be an amazing crystal for actually helping to integrate the head and the heart and make sure that, as we've said, we think about the things, we think about the impact, we look at the bigger picture, but we don't just come from this real philosophical or intellectual basis. We actually come from a compassionate, accepting, heart-based way as well. So there's a reason why this crystal is a bloody good crystal and deserves to be one of my favorites, I think. I hope we've done it justice. I hope that you have fallen in love with this crystal just a little bit more. I know I've had revelations as we've had this confab, which has been really, really beautiful and my favorite crystal. And I thought I knew it all, but not. There's always more to learn. If you don't have it, I think you better get yourself a piece. And whether it's from Namibia, where that kind of base piece is, or whether it's from somewhere else, as long as a copper melange or copper vomit, whatever it may be, you're going to find that this is an amazing crystal or stone or rock to have in your collection. We'll be back next week when we dive into another amazing gift, or maybe a few gifts from Mother Nature. We'll see you then. Take care and blessed be.